The evening air was thick with smoke from roadside grills and the scent of freshly fried plantain. Inside a modest, noisy restaurant tucked into a busy corner of Lagos mainland, Cleopatra Obi balanced a tray of drinks and plates on her tired arms. She moved from table to table, her lips trained in a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her back ached, her feet were swollen in her worn-out flats, and her landlord had just sent another message. Rent was going up again, as if her life wasn't already a struggle. Cleopatra's focus was fading, her mind half stuck between the cries of her sick mother back home in Asuka and the endless shifts she still had to complete. She exhaled softly, adjusting the strap of her apron and repeating to herself, "Just finish your shift, Cleo. Don't think too much." A man near the window clapped rudely. "Waitress, what's taking you so long?" "I'm coming, sir," she called, trying to sound cheerful, but her voice cracked under the weight of fatigue. She placed the tray on another table and made her way toward the rude customer. As she passed the glass entrance, something outside caught her attention. She paused, her brows pinched in confusion. There, just beyond the entrance and partially shielded by a crooked umbrella stand, sat a boy. Alone, in the rain. She moved closer to the door. He was maybe 7 or 8. His head was lowered, his small arms wrapped tightly around a white walking stick. His clothes were soaked, his frame unmoving. Cleopatra blinked hard, unsure if she was seeing correctly. The rain had started lightly, but now it poured, unrelenting. People outside scurried for cover, umbrellas popped open like mushrooms, and cars zoomed past, splashing muddy water onto sidewalks. But the boy, he didn't move. Cleopatra turned toward the woman at the cashier's desk. "Please, who is that child outside?" The woman looked up briefly, then shrugged. "He came with a man earlier. The man went back to his car. I guess he's still there." "In this rain?" Cleopatra asked, her voice rising. The cashier frowned. "Looks like it. I don't know them." Cleopatra turned to go back to the kitchen. The tray needed washing, customers were waiting, and her boss wouldn't be happy if she took another break. But her heart refused to settle. She looked out again, and the boy hadn't moved an inch. His head remained bowed. His stick lay pressed to his chest. The rain was now soaking him completely. Without another thought, Cleopatra rushed to the door, yanked it open, and ran outside. "Sweetheart," she whispered, kneeling beside him as cold water splashed around her knees. "Are you okay?" The boy turned his head slowly. She could now see the tears mixed with rain on his cheeks. "I'm fine," he said softly. Cleopatra reached for his hand. It was cold, trembling. "Come with me," she said gently. "Let me take you inside. You shouldn't be out here." He didn't argue. He rose slowly, leaning on her as she led him into the restaurant. Customers stared as they passed, whispering behind half-empty glasses. She guided him to a corner seat near the window where it was dry and warm. She helped him remove his soaked jacket and gently wiped his face with a napkin. "What's your name?" she asked, kneeling beside him again. "Caleb," he replied, his voice almost a whisper. Cleopatra offered a small, soft smile. "I'm Cleopatra, but you can call me Cleo." He nodded, still shaking. "You're freezing," she said. "I'll bring you something hot to eat. Is that okay?" He hesitated. "He told me to wait." "Who?" she asked. "My dad. He went to the car to take a meeting." Cleopatra's brows knitted. "He left you in the rain?" Caleb nodded. She bit the inside of her cheek to stop herself from saying something sharp. Instead, she squeezed his hand gently. "Just sit here. I'll get you food, all right? You don't have to tell him." Caleb nodded again, very slightly this time. Cleopatra stood up and rushed into the kitchen. She scooped a generous helping of steaming jollof rice onto a plate, the last one prepared for a now-canceled order, and returned quickly to the boy. Caleb was still sitting quietly, his face calmer, though his hands trembled slightly. "I brought you something warm," she said gently. "Jollof rice. It's really good. I'll help you." She sat beside him and offered the first spoon. Caleb took the bite, chewed slowly, and then a small smile cracked through his damp lips. It's nice, he said. Cleopatra's heart melted. Good, she whispered. There's plenty more. She fed him spoon after spoon, and with every bite, the boy relaxed a little more. By the time the plate was half finished, Caleb was smiling openly. Thank you, ma'am, he said quietly. You're very kind. Her heart clenched. You're welcome, Caleb. You're safe now. She didn't know who his father was or why anyone would leave a blind child alone in a thunderstorm. But what she did know was that this little boy mattered. She had felt invisible most of her life, but today she would make someone feel seen. Meanwhile, just outside the restaurant, a black SUV sat parked with tinted windows fogged by humidity. Inside, Khalid Danjuma, CEO of Danjuma Group and one of Nigeria's most powerful businessmen, sat on a Zoom call with foreign investors. His brows were furrowed in concentration, his headset balanced tightly over his head, and his fingers hovered over the laptop keyboard. It wasn't until thunder cracked loudly overhead that something inside him jolted. He looked out the window instinctively, towards the bench where he had left his son. The bench was empty. Khalid's breath caught. He sat upright, his heart beginning to race. Then, through the glass of the restaurant's entrance, he saw it. A young woman in a soaked uniform, gently feeding his son jollof rice and wiping his hands like a mother would. Caleb was smiling. Khaled froze. He hadn't seen his son smile like that in years. His voice faltered on the call. He muted himself, closed the laptop, and slowly removed his headset. He watched, motionless, as the woman fed his son. Not as an act of charity, but with real tenderness, as if Caleb was her own. For the first time in what felt like forever, something stirred in Khalid's chest. Not anger, not control, not sorrow, but something raw and real. The kind of emotion he had locked away for years. He pushed open the door and stepped out into the rain-soaked street, no longer caring about the meeting, his reputation, or anything else that once seemed important. He was walking towards something new. The air inside the restaurant was warm, laced with the scent of spices and roasted meat. Khalid Danjuma paused at the entrance, droplets of rain clinging to his designer suit. For a moment, he simply stood there, frozen by the sight before him. Caleb, his only son, sat at a small table, cheeks flushed and mouth curling into a rare, peaceful smile. A young woman knelt beside him, wiping his damp hands and speaking to him like she had known him for years. No panic, no pity, just care. Khalid's chest tightened. The cold part of him, the part that had stayed frozen since the day Amara died, began to melt, drop by drop. He walked toward them slowly. Caleb's face tilted at the sound of footsteps. Dad? Khalid stopped, stunned by how quickly the child had recognized him. Yes, son, he said softly, dropping to one knee beside him. I'm here. Caleb's hand reached for his. It was still damp and trembling. I'm sorry, Khalid whispered. I shouldn't have left you like that. I didn't think. I wasn't careful. That was wrong. Caleb said nothing. His small fingers held tightly to his father's hand, as if that alone answered everything. Cleopatra rose quietly to her feet, wiping her apron with the corner of her sleeve, unsure of what to do or say. Her eyes met Khalid's, eyes that once held power and pride, now dimmed with regret. Thank you, Khalid said, standing slowly. You took care of him. Cleopatra shook her head. Anyone would have done the same. No, he replied, his voice firmer. Not everyone would. A beat passed between them, full of something unspoken. Then Khalid turned back to his son. Ready to go home? Caleb nodded. Yes, Daddy. Khalid took his son's hand and led him out of the restaurant, the door closing softly behind them. Cleopatra stood there for a moment, watching them disappear into the night. Later that night after her shift, Cleopatra returned to her room. It was little more than a box, with faded walls, a single bed, and a flickering bulb that hummed above her. She dropped her bag by the door, peeled off her shoes, and collapsed onto the mattress with a groan. Her feet ached, her head throbbed, her chest was tight. She checked her phone. Still no message from the landlord, which meant the rent issue hadn't gone away. Her mother's medicine costs were still looming, and she had barely made enough tips today to cover her transport back and forth. As the tears came, Cleopatra buried her face into her pillow. She didn't cry loud, just soft tears that slipped out without warning. The type that came when you were used to pain. How will I survive this month, she wondered. Then her thoughts wandered to the boy Caleb, his soft voice, his polite words, the way he smiled after just a few bites of food. "You are very kind," he had said. Cleopatra wiped her tears and allowed herself a tiny smile. Maybe her life was a mess, but tonight she had made someone's life a little better. That was something. Across Lagos Island, in a sprawling mansion in Ikoyi, Khalid sat on a leather couch in silence. Caleb had already gone to bed, but sleep eluded him. The house was quiet, too quiet. It always had been. Ever since Amara died, everything inside these walls had become sterile, polished, and cold. A perfect shell, but lifeless within. Khalid opened a drawer and pulled out a photo frame. It was Amara, smiling, holding a newborn Caleb. Her eyes, as always, were full of life and laughter. He traced the edge of the glass, whispering, "You'd hate what I've become." He had given Caleb the best tutors, the most expensive doctors, new toys and technology that read books aloud, but he had never once tried to just be with him. He had thought he was doing what was right, what a strong man should do: build an empire, shield the child from pain. Instead, he had built a wall around both of them. His mind returned to Cleopatra, the way she had wiped Caleb's face with such patience, not caring who was watching. She hadn't known who the boy was. She hadn't been trying to impress anyone, and yet she had done more in that one moment than Khaled had in 7 years. He picked up his phone. "Hello, Danjuma," it was his driver. "Yes, I need a favor," Khalid said. "Anything, sir. There's a waitress from that restaurant near the junction. Her name is Cleopatra Obi. I know the place. What should I do?" "Find out more about her, quietly, where she lives, who she is, anything you can learn. Don't tell her it's from me." There was a pause on the line. Then, "Understood, sir. I'll begin tomorrow." Khalid ended the call. He stood and made his way to Caleb's room. The boy was asleep, his arms curled around his pillow. Khalid stood in the doorway, guilt and tenderness gnawing at him. "I'll do better," he whispered. "I have to." 3 days later, Cleopatra was outside her one-room apartment, sweeping the dusty floor. The sun was low, painting the sky in fading gold. Her shift had been longer than usual. Her legs ached, and her arms were sore, but her mind was numb from the landlord's last warning: pay the rent or move out. She bent to collect the trash when a knock echoed from the door behind her. She froze. No one visited her. No one even knew where she lived, except perhaps the boss at the restaurant and that one girl she occasionally shared plantain with after work. She opened the door slowly. There, standing in pressed slacks and a soft white shirt, was Khalid Danjuma. She gasped. "You?" she asked wide-eyed. He nodded once, a small smile on his lips. "I hope I'm not intruding." No, please come in," she stammered, stepping aside. It's not much." The room was tiny, clean but modest. One chair, one table, a faded curtain hanging over the window. Khalid walked in and placed a sealed envelope on the table. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. "I saw what you did for my son," he said. Cleopatra shook her head. "It wasn't much. He was just alone. I couldn't leave him." "You saw him. You cared. That means more than you know," Khalid said. Then he gestured toward the envelope. "Please, open it." Her fingers trembled as she did. Inside wasn't money as she expected, but a letter. She skimmed the lines, then froze. Her eyes lifted. "A job offer?" Khalid nodded. "Come work with me as my human relations assistant. The position includes housing, a proper apartment, no more rent troubles." Cleopatra blinked rapidly. I don't understand." "You don't have to. Just know that I see something rare in you. kindness, integrity. The world needs more of that. My company needs it. I need it. She sat slowly on the edge of her bed, overwhelmed. You don't have to decide now, Khalid said gently. My driver will come by tomorrow. If you're ready, he'll take you. He moved to the door. Thank you again, Cleopatra, for everything. Then he was gone. She sat in stunned silence, the letter pressed to her chest. For the first time in a long time, hope didn't feel like a stranger. Monday morning came cloaked in anxiety and uncertainty. Cleopatra Obi stood in front of the tall glass building known as a Danjuma Group headquarters. The structure rose into the Lagos skyline like a monument to power and money. People in crisp suits buzzed through revolving doors, some holding briefcases, others barking instructions into Bluetooth earpieces. Everything moved with calculated urgency. Cleopatra clutched her modest handbag close to her chest. Her shoes, polished the night before, still pinched her toes. The blouse she wore had been ironed with love and care, but her heart beat like a drum in her chest. What am I doing here? She asked herself. Then the company car pulled up beside her. The driver, the same man from 3 days ago, stepped out and opened the door with a respectful nod. Oh, good morning, Miss Obi. Mr. Danjuma is expecting you. She inhaled deeply and nodded. Let's go. Inside, the building was a different world. Shiny floors reflected overhead lights. Flower arrangements sat perfectly on polished tables, and the air was cool and lemon-scented. As they walked through the lobby, Cleopatra felt eyes follow her. Some admiring, some judging, most curious. A receptionist picked up her phone and murmured something. Within moments, Khalid Danjuma himself emerged from his glass office doors. He was dressed immaculately in a navy blue suit, his posture regal yet calm. His eyes lit up the moment he saw her. You made it, he said. Cleopatra gave a small smile. Yes, sir. No need for sir, he said gently. You're part of the company now. Come, let me show you around. They walked together down the hallway. Whispers followed them. Is that the new girl? She's beautiful, but where's her experience? I heard she was a waitress. She came through the CEO personally. Can you imagine? Khalid paused mid-walk and looked at her. You hear them, don't you? She nodded, trying not to show how much it stung. Good, he said. Now let me tell you something. You don't have to prove anything to anyone here. Just be yourself. Greet people. Listen when needed. Speak only what you believe. That's what brought you here. Cleopatra swallowed her anxiety. I'll do my best. That's all I ask. Her new office was small but clean, tucked just a few doors from Khaled's. It came with a sleek desk, a desktop computer, and a coffee table with a single orchid in a pot. She spent her first few hours reading orientation materials, jotting notes, and trying not to trip over herself when speaking to the other staff. Some ignored her completely. Some stared with suspicion. Others smiled briefly and moved on. But she didn't flinch. She had walked through rain for strangers before. She had served rude customers with grace. She would survive this too. Later that afternoon, Khaled appeared at her door. Come with me, he said. Where to? She asked. There's a board meeting. Things are tense, and I believe your voice might calm things down. She blinked. Me? Why would they listen to me? Because you speak from your heart. You've already taught me something they couldn't in years. The boardroom was long, sleek, and cold. 12 men and women in suits sat around a polished mahogany table, laptops open and brows furrowed. No one smiled. No one even looked up as she entered. Cleopatra sat beside Khalid, her palms sweating. Someone on the far end leaned toward another and whispered, "Why is she here?" She heard it, and for a second, her chest tightened. Then she remembered Caleb's quiet words, "You are very kind." And Khalid's voice, "Just be yourself." The room grew quiet as the topic turned to employee satisfaction reports. Numbers were down, complaints were up, staff turnover was rising. Then, out of nowhere, Khaled spoke. "Cleopatra, care to share your thoughts?" 12 heads turned toward her at once. Her breath caught, but she stood. I know I'm new here, she began softly, and I don't know many business words, but I do know people. They blinked at her. I know people work better when they feel seen, when they feel heard. I was a waitress before this, and I've seen rich men talk down to workers like they're invisible. But I've also seen how kindness, a little warmth, can make someone do 10 times their job. The room was still. One man scoffed. We don't pay people to feel good. We pay them to deliver. Cleopatra nodded. And they will, but only when they know they matter. Silence stretched. Then unexpectedly, one of the senior members tapped her pen and said, "She has a point." Others slowly nodded. Even those who didn't want to agree found themselves thinking. Cleopatra sat back down, heart pounding. She didn't know what she had just done, but it felt right. After the meeting, Khalid whispered, "You did well." She smiled, trying not to cry. But not everyone in the room was happy. Mr. Tayo Adekunle, a board member who had been in the company for 6 years, sat in his office afterward, fists clenched. "She just got here," he muttered to himself. "And already she's in the boardroom?" He stared out the window and spotted Cleopatra laughing gently with a colleague down below. Her smile irritated him. Her presence unnerved him. She's taking my place. That's what he believed. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and created a new file. Title, Cleopatra Obi Watch List. Inside he typed, "Asked a question during orientation. Late to the cafeteria line on Tuesday. Asked for clarity on her onboarding process. Spoke confidently in boardroom." Then he whispered with a sinister grin, "If she slips, I'll be ready." The game had begun. Back in her office, Cleopatra sat staring out the window. The boardroom had drained her, but something inside her was settling. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rising. The office was quiet that evening. Eerily quiet. Most of the staff had clocked out hours ago. Their laughter and footsteps long faded into the corridors. But Cleopatra Obi remained at her desk, her fingers aching from a full day of typing, organizing, and responding to internal HR reports. She was exhausted, but there was a contented glow on her face. Slowly, she packed her things, humming softly under her breath. Then the door creaked open. She turned quickly. "Good evening, Miss Obi," said Mr. Tayo Adekunle, with a small, courteous smile. "Oh, good evening, sir." She straightened. "Still working late?" He nodded. "Just needed to confirm something on the system, but my laptop is acting up. I was wondering, may I use yours for just a minute? Just need to check a file." Cleopatra didn't hesitate. "Of course. Let me move aside for you." She stood and gestured toward the seat. Tayo smiled and walked over, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. He inserted it quickly and began typing. Less than 60 seconds later, he stood. "Thank you, Cleopatra." "You're welcome, sir," she said, smiling politely. He walked out slowly, shoulders relaxed. His footsteps were confident, calculated. Cleopatra sat again and resumed packing. Everything seemed normal. But it wasn't. 2 days later, inside Khalid Danjuma's office, tension was high. He sat at his desk, jaw clenched as he stared at a printed document. His assistant had just handed it over 10 minutes ago, and it was damning. The company's financial statement for the last quarter had been leaked via email. The message came from a company computer. Worse, it came from Cleopatra Obi's official email address. He picked up his office phone. "Ask Cleopatra to come to my office, now." Minutes later, Cleopatra stepped in, her heart pounding as she noticed the grave look on his face. "Good morning, sir," she said, voice tight. Khalid didn't smile. He simply pushed the document across the desk. She picked it up, scanning the contents. Her breath caught. Her name was clearly printed in the email signature, attached to the company's confidential financial report. "Sir," she whispered, her hand trembling. "This isn't mine. I didn't send this. I've never even opened this file." "I know," Khalid said quietly, "but this email came from your system." Her knees nearly buckled. She sat slowly in the chair across from him. "Why would anyone do this to me?" "I have a theory," he said, leaning back. "Not everyone is happy you're here. She bit her lip, barely holding back the emotions swelling in her throat. Am I, am I in trouble? The board has already seen the leak. Some of them want you suspended while an investigation is carried out. She looked up at him, eyes wide with panic. But I'm innocent. I believe you, he said gently, and I'm going to help you prove it. But for now, be careful who you trust. Cleopatra nodded slowly, the paper still shaking in her hands. That day she didn't eat. She barely spoke. A heavy knot had formed in her chest, tightening with every passing hour. But she wasn't going down without a fight. For the next several days, she and Khaled stayed behind after work, combing through digital logs, camera footage, and timestamps. They worked in silence, sometimes until midnight, determined to trace the breach. One evening, while scrolling through system access history, Cleopatra gasped. Wait, look at this. Khalid leaned over her shoulder. Her eyes widened as she pointed at the screen. That's the exact time the email was sent. From my system. Whose name is listed in the login session? Khaled asked. She clicked through the logs. There it was, Tayo Adekunle. Her breath caught. That evening, he came to my office, said he needed to use the system for a minute. Khaled's eyes narrowed. So he waited for you to step out and sent the email during that window? Cleopatra felt sick. Why? Why would he want to frame me? Because he sees you as a threat, Khalid said, and he wants you out of the company. There was a beat of silence. Then Khalid stood. Now we have proof. She looked up at him, her eyes fierce. I'm ready. He smiled faintly. Good, but we'll move carefully. No one must suspect we know. She nodded, her voice low but sure. We'll take him down. A week later, the boardroom was full again. The air was sharp with judgment. Tension draped across the room like thick fog. The chairman tapped the table. Bring her in. Cleopatra walked through the door slowly. Her hair was pulled neatly into a bun. Her clothes were modest, clean, pressed. She held a brown file to her chest as if it were her sword. Miss Obi, said one of the executives, you understand the seriousness of this allegation? I do, she said clearly. Is your name not the sender on this email? Asked another. It is, she replied, but I didn't send it, and I can prove it. She stepped forward and placed the file on the table. These are system access logs. The email was sent from my workstation, yes, but not by me. The person who sent it was Mr. Tayo Adekunle. Gasps echoed around the room. All eyes turned to Tayo, who sat stiffly in his chair, his lips drawn thin. That's a lie, he barked. No, Khalid said calmly, stepping in. It's not. We pulled login timestamps from the IT department. The email was sent at 6:18 p.m., the exact minute Mr. Tayo accessed Cleopatra's system. We also have footage of him entering and leaving her office. The board members flipped Amara the file in front of them. One of them, the oldest in the group, shook his head. Tayo, how could you do this? I didn't. Another member cut him off. You wanted her gone. I supported her speech that day. Tayo snapped. You supported her because you had to, but you never wanted her here, another added. Tayo's words dried up. His mouth hung open, but nothing came out. Khalid turned to the board. I stand with Cleopatra Obi. Her record is clean, her integrity is intact, and her work has been exceptional. One by one, the others nodded. The chairman's voice boomed. As CEO, what do you propose? Khalid looked directly at Tayo. I propose immediate termination for breach of trust, sabotage, and gross misconduct. Tayo rose from his chair in protest. You can't do this. I've been here for years. And in one moment, Khalid said coldly, you destroyed all of that. A guard stepped into the room, and Tayo's face fell. He was escorted out without another word. Cleopatra stood there, her breath steady, her hands trembling slightly. She had defended herself. She had uncovered the truth. And for the first time in her life, she had won. Khalid turned to her, his voice low but proud. You stood your ground, he said. I'm proud of you. Her eyes glistened, but this time the tears were full of joy. Following the boardroom confrontation and the decisive termination of Mr. Tayo Adekunle, the internal atmosphere within Danjuma Group experienced a palpable shift. Tension, once thick and unspoken among department heads and administrative personnel, began to ease. A collective recalibration was underway, one not just of corporate hierarchy, but of trust and respect within the organizational structure. For Cleopatra Obi, the days that followed were a blend of cautious optimism and emotional recalibration. Her reputation, previously hanging in the balance, had been publicly vindicated, yet she did not gloat nor relish her victory. Rather, she doubled down on her professional output, arriving earlier than required and leaving only when every pending file was accounted for. Her reports were concise, her memos meticulously drafted, and her interpersonal exchanges handled with measured diplomacy. Khalid Danjuma observed her progression with the quiet scrutiny of a man unaccustomed to admiration. It was not simply her competence that impressed him, but her restraint, her ability to navigate institutional politics without compromise. It was, in many respects, a mirror of the woman he had once loved and lost. Meanwhile, on the domestic front, Khalid Danjuma was undergoing a transformation of his own. The child, long accustomed to silence and spatial isolation, had begun to speak more freely. He no longer dined with hunched shoulders or spoke with tentative hesitations. Instead, his words flowed with growing confidence. The staff noticed. So did the housekeepers. But none more so than his father. During one such evening, Khalid returned home earlier than usual to find Cleopatra seated on the floor of the living room, her shoes off, her head tilted back as she listened to Caleb recite a poem he had memorized in Braille. His fingers brushed gently over the page as his soft voice filled the room with cadence and warmth. "You're getting better," she said, gently clapping. "I had a good teacher," he replied with a small, proud grin. Khalid stood at the archway, his briefcase still in hand. It took a moment for either of them to notice his presence, and when Cleopatra looked up, there was no shock or awkwardness, just a nod of acknowledgement. A mutual understanding had long since formed between them, one built not on formalities, but on shared responsibility for the boy they both now protected. Later that night, after dinner and after Caleb had been tucked into bed, Khalid lingered in the hallway outside his son's room. His thoughts were erratic, contradictory, unusual for a man known for calculating decisions and methodical outcomes. He walked into the living room where Cleopatra remained, organizing a stack of HR reports she had taken home to review. "I wanted to ask you something," he said, his voice quieter than usual. Cleopatra looked up, instantly alert. "Yes, Mr. Danjuma?" He paused. "No, not Mr. Danjuma, just Khalid." She set the files aside. "Okay, Khalid, how do you feel when you're here?" he asked, not with the authority of a CEO, but with the uncertainty of a man unaccustomed to personal inquiry. She regarded him for a moment. "I feel useful, present, like I matter. Not because of my title, but because Caleb smiles, because things feel lighter, less cold." He exhaled slowly as though releasing something long held. "Would you ever consider making this place your home?" Her eyes searched his for meaning. "As in, live here?" "As in more than that," he said carefully. "As in being part of this family. Permanently." The silence between them deepened. He continued. "I've watched you bring light into Caleb's world. But it's not just him. You've brought it into mine too. I never expected to feel again after Amara, but I do, and I can't ignore it anymore." Cleopatra's throat constricted. "Khalid, that's a lot. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now," he said. "Just think about it." She nodded slowly. "I will." The next week passed with delicate tension. Cleopatra did not avoid Khalid, nor did she treat him differently, but there was a new awareness in her movements, an internal dialogue playing out behind her eyes. She was weighing what his proposal truly meant, not just the social ramifications or the implications for her career, but the emotional reality of becoming a wife and a mother, all within a span of months. Meanwhile, Khalid remained composed but expectant. He didn't push, he didn't prod, he simply waited. One Friday evening, Cleopatra arrived at the house earlier than usual. She had requested to pick Caleb up from his special school, and now the two of them entered together, her hand guiding his as they stepped through the threshold. Khaled rose from the couch when he saw them. Cleopatra walked toward him, her eyes unwavering. "I've made my decision," she said. His breath hitched. "I'll marry you." Caleb, standing beside her, let out a surprised cheer. "Really?" She smiled and knelt down to his level. "Yes, sweetheart, if you'll have me." Caleb hugged her tightly. "I want you to be my mummy." Khaled took a step closer and placed a hand on her back, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for choosing us." She looked up at him and said, "You didn't just offer me a title, Khalid. You offered me a purpose. I won't take that for granted." And just like that, the rain that once symbolized pain now seemed far behind them. What remained was warmth, light, and the beginning of something deeply rooted in truth. The house felt different now. It wasn't the furniture. Those remained polished and untouched. It wasn't the lighting or the expansive staircase that curved like royalty down into the grand hallway. No, the change wasn't in the walls. It was in the air. Cleopatra Obi moved through the Danjuma residence with a grace that surprised even her. Not because she had suddenly changed into someone new, but because the house, once cold and pristine like a boardroom, now seemed to respond to her presence. The staff greeted her with warmer eyes. Caleb's laughter echoed across the living room instead of fading behind doors. And Khalid? He had begun to smile, genuinely. Though their engagement had not yet been announced formally to the outside world, inside these walls, it was as real as breath. Cleopatra had moved into a guest room for now, her insistence not Khalid's, but her touch was everywhere. Freshly picked flowers by the window. Caleb's braille books organized in tidy rows. A new recipe tried out in the kitchen at least once a week. And in the quiet moments, Khalid watched her. He often found himself pausing outside the study, where her laughter would spill as she helped Caleb sound out new words, or lingering longer than necessary at the dinner table, fascinated by the way she engaged his son, not with pity, but with joyful purpose. One evening, as they shared tea in the garden, Khalid asked, "Do you ever miss your old life, the restaurant, the pace?" Cleopatra chuckled. "Miss being yelled at for bringing cold pepper soup?" "Not particularly." He smiled. "But you were happy there?" She looked thoughtful. "I was surviving. There's a difference. I think this is the first time I'm learning what peace feels like." Khalid looked at her for a long moment. "That's all I ever wanted for you." Her eyes softened. "And what about you? When's the last time you felt peace?" Khalid didn't answer right away. He glanced towards the upper balcony where Caleb had hung wind chimes that now tinkled softly in the evening breeze. "This morning," he finally said, "when I saw you braid Caleb's hair and kiss his forehead like it was the most natural thing in the world." While the Danjuma household healed, so did Danjuma Group. Cleopatra's influence was no longer subtle. She had become a bridge between the executives and the junior staff, between policies and the people they affected. Her suggestions were fair, often simple, yet always effective. Employee satisfaction scores rose. Sick leave abuse dropped. Even the front desk staff now greeted each day with more cheer. Khalid allowed her to lead internal training sessions. At first she was hesitant, afraid her informal tone and simple words wouldn't hold weight. But he reassured her. "People listen when they feel seen. Speak like you always have. That's your power." At the first session, she told the story of her days as a waitress, serving tired customers, ignoring insults, and learning to read emotion just by the way someone stirred their drink. "I don't have a fancy degree," she said, "but I've learned more about people from cleaning tables than any textbook could have taught me." By the end of her speech, the room was silent. And when she finished, the applause was long and sincere. Meanwhile, preparations for the wedding began to take quiet form. Cleopatra wanted something small. "I don't want flashing lights and front-page headlines," she had told Khalid. Just a day full of truth. Khalid agreed. Then let's make it private. Just family. Just love. He offered to fly her mother in from Nsuka, and Cleopatra's eyes welled with gratitude. She's been so sick, she won't believe any of this is real. Then let's show her. In the following days, Khalid handled arrangements with the speed and precision he used for billionaire mergers. Her mother arrived in Lagos, tired but glowing, and when she saw her daughter standing inside that mansion, beside a powerful man who looked at her with reverence, she wept. "This is God," she whispered. Cleopatra hugged her tight. "No, Mama. This is kindness, coming back to us." One evening, just days before the planned ceremony, Cleopatra wandered into what used to be Amara Danjuma's private art room. It had been untouched since her death. Locked up, dust-covered, quiet. Khalid found her there, standing in the doorway, her eyes tracing unfinished sketches and canvases leaned against the walls. "I shouldn't be here," she said softly. He walked beside her. "It's okay. I've avoided this room for years. Maybe it's time someone let the air back in." Cleopatra turned to him. "Do you still think about her?" "Every day," he said honestly, "but not in a way that dims what I feel for you. Amara gave me Caleb. She was a beautiful part of my past, but you're my future." She reached for his hand. "I don't want to replace her." "You don't need to," he said, squeezing gently. "You created a space of your own, in Caleb's heart, in this home, and in mine." The night before their wedding, Cleopatra sat beside Caleb's bed. "Are you excited for tomorrow?" she asked. He nodded. "Will you wear perfume?" She laughed. "Of course." He smiled. "You always smell like flowers. I like that." She brushed his hair with her fingers. "And you, my prince, will walk with me to your father." "Deal?" He nodded. "Deal." She stood to leave, but Caleb called out again. "Cleopatra?" "Yes?" "Thank you for being my mummy." She covered her mouth, emotions swirling like a storm. She knelt and pulled him into a tight hug. "Thank you for choosing me." As she lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, Cleopatra thought back to that rainy evening outside the restaurant. She had no umbrella, no plan, just a heart that wouldn't let her walk past a blind boy in the storm. She didn't know that act would lead here. A mansion, a son, a man who looked at her like she was the morning after years of night. And now, a home with her name on it. So, the sun rose quietly over Banana Island, casting soft golden streaks across the sky. Lagos had a way of being chaotic, loud and unrelenting, but this morning felt suspended in time. Peaceful. Still. Inside the Danjuma residence, the usual buzz of daily routines had been replaced with something sacred. Gentle footsteps, whispered instructions, and the aroma of jasmine oil and vanilla-scented candles wafted through the halls. It was wedding day. But not the loud, camera-flashing kind Cleopatra had often witnessed on the streets of Lekki or in online celebrity gossip. No paparazzi, no extravagant banners, no chattering bridal train rehearsing dance steps on Instagram Live. Just love, just truth. Cleopatra sat at the vanity in the master suite, wrapped in a silk robe the color of soft blush. Her makeup was barely there, just a gentle touch to highlight the radiance already in her eyes. Her hair was pulled back into a timeless bun, pinned with a few delicate pearls that shimmered like the morning light. Her mother stood behind her, holding her shoulders with trembling hands. "My child," she whispered, "from carrying water in our compound to walking into a home like this, you make me believe again." Cleopatra held back tears. "You raised me to love, Mama. That's all I did." Outside the room, Caleb waited in his custom white agbada, his fingers tracing the embroidery. "Daddy, is she ready?" he asked, gripping his cane with one hand and a small flower bouquet with the other. Khaled adjusted his own collar, standing in a deep blue caftan, regal but warm. "She'll be out soon. Can I walk her in?" Caleb asked. Khaled's voice cracked softly. "You're the only one I trust to do it." Moments later, the soft notes of live violins began to echo through the marble hallway. No dramatic music, just a simple, soulful melody played by two musicians in the corner of the private garden. Khalid stood beneath the canopy, white linen floating in the breeze, surrounded by eucalyptus, fresh lilies, and the quiet smiles of just a few guests. Close friends, loyal staff, a few family members who had come not for spectacle, but to witness healing. Then everyone turned. There she was. Cleopatra walked slowly, hand in hand with Caleb. The boy couldn't see the way the light wrapped around her, couldn't see how every petal seemed to boo as she passed. But he could feel it, the pride in her grip, the joy in her breath. Khalid's heart stilled. It wasn't just the gown, simple, elegant, hugging her form like it was made just for her. It wasn't the veil or the smile. It was her spirit, unchanged, untouched by wealth, untainted by status. Still the same woman who once served jollof rice to strangers and knelt in the rain for a boy no one else saw. As he reached the altar, Caleb whispered, "She's here, Daddy." Khaled stepped forward and took her hand. The officiant smiled. "We are gathered here, not just to witness a marriage, but to honor something deeper, restoration, grace, and a love that bloomed in the most unexpected of places." They exchanged no lengthy vows, no grand rehearsed speeches, just hands held tight, just glances that said more than words ever could. Then at the final blessing, Khalid leaned forward and whispered in her ear, "I found myself again, in the kindness you gave my son." And Cleopatra, her eyes misty, replied, "And I found a home, in the silence you broke for me." The reception was modest but radiant. Guests danced beneath twinkling string lights in the garden. A jazz band played softly as finger foods were passed on silver trays. Children played by the fountain. Caleb sat with his cousins, proudly telling them how he walked his mummy down the aisle. Khalid watched from a distance, arms folded, a rare smile lingering on his lips. "You look lighter," said his sister Adara, who had flown in from London. "I feel it," he replied. "You finally let the past go." He turned toward the woman laughing by the dessert table, her cheeks glowing, her voice melodic. "No," he said, "I didn't let the past go. I let it lead me here." Later that evening, after the last guest had left and the final lanterns were dimmed, Cleopatra stood by the bedroom window. The ocean breeze swept through sheer curtains, and the distant lull of water striking rocks echoed like a lullaby. Khalid joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "We did it," she smiled. "We did." He took a breath, long and deep. "I used to think my story ended the day Amara died. I had closed the chapter, sealed it." She leaned into him. "But grief doesn't have to be a full stop. Sometimes it's a comma, a pause before something softer." He turned her gently to face him. "You didn't just bring Caleb joy. You gave me permission to breathe again. And you gave me the chance to be more than just a survivor." They didn't speak again for a while. There was no need. The quiet in the room was filled with every vow they never had to say out loud. 6 weeks had passed since the quiet wedding under white linen and soft violins. Life had not become magical. Dishes still needed washing. Deadlines still arrived. Rain still fell unpredictably over Lagos traffic. But something fundamental had shifted in the Danjuma household, and everyone could feel it. For the first time in years, the home was alive. In Cleopatra Obi now, Cleopatra Danjuma woke each day with purpose, not only as the CEO's wife, but as the heart of a small, healing family. She still handled company reports, still managed HR responsibilities, but now she also braided Caleb's hair on Saturdays, organized dinner menus with the cook, and brought music back into the halls with humming and late-night dancing in socks on marble floors. Caleb, too, was blossoming. He'd always been a gentle child, but now he was vocal, opinionated, and mischievously funny. He told riddles during breakfast. He argued about bedtime. He made Cleopatra laugh so hard one night she dropped a whole bowl of popcorn. "Don't blame me," Caleb grinned. "Blame your weak belly." Khalid had stood at the door that evening, watching them in quiet awe. He no longer carried the weight of unspoken grief on his shoulders. His face had softened, his laugh no longer rare, and though he still worked with precision and authority, he now left the office earlier, choosing dinner with his wife and son over conference calls and cocktail meetings. One Sunday evening, as the family lounged in the garden, Caleb lay on a mat between them, head resting on Cleopatra's lap. "Do you remember when we first met?" he asked. Cleopatra brushed a hand over his forehead. "Of course. You were soaked in rain, sitting all alone." "I wasn't scared," Caleb said, "but I was tired of waiting." Khalid leaned in. "I was the one who left you waiting. I'll never forget that." "You came back," Caleb said, "and you brought her." He reached up, blindly touching Cleopatra's chin. "I like how our family feels now. It's warm." Cleopatra kissed his forehead. "That's the best kind of family. Not perfect, just warm." At the office, things continued to evolve. Under Cleopatra's guidance, the HR department launched a mentorship program, pairing senior executives with junior staff. Khalid implemented a new leadership model based on team empathy scores, a revolutionary move that made business magazines across West Africa. One afternoon, a journalist requested to interview Cleopatra. She hesitated at first. "I didn't build this company," she told Khalid. "I just serve it." He shook his head. "You restored it." When the article was finally published, the headline read, "From Rain to Roses, How Cleopatra Danjuma Rebuilt Culture at the Top." It went viral within 48 hours. Messages poured in from women across the country, young professionals, single mothers, waitresses, even students. "You make me believe in second chances. I now see that kindness is power. Your story made me cry, and try again." Cleopatra read each message with humility, never forgetting where she had come from, or the boy on the bench who had changed her life. One evening, Khaled surprised her. He handed her a gold-embossed folder. "What's this?" she asked, confused. "Open it." Inside was a deed, a piece of land in her hometown in Nsuka, fully paid, titled in her name. "This is for your mother," Khaled said, "to build the small clinic she always dreamed of." "You told me that once," I remembered. Tears filled Cleopatra's eyes. "I don't have the words." "You don't need them," he said. "We're building more than a life. We're building a legacy." And they were. One act of kindness had become a bridge. A blind boy, forgotten in the rain, had brought together a man with a broken heart and a woman with nothing but hope in her hands. What followed wasn't a fairy tale. It was something stronger. It was a family, built in light. The magic wasn't in the grand moments. It was in the ordinary ones. Like Tuesday mornings, when Cleopatra Danjuma brewed ginger tea while Caleb sat at the kitchen table, carefully folding his socks into tiny squares. Or when Khalid leaned against the doorframe, pretending to read the business section while secretly watching his wife laugh with the cook about how she ruined yet another pot of ogbano. They had fallen into a rhythm, not perfect, but comforting. Like sunlight through white curtains. Like the smell of soap on clean skin after a long day. Like the sound of Caleb's voice practicing a new riddle in the backseat of the car. That Tuesday started like any other. Cleopatra was reviewing some new onboarding proposals when she suddenly stood up, pressed a hand to her stomach, and paused. The room tilted slightly, not violently, but enough to make her sit. "Are you all right?" Khalid asked, looking up from across the room. She nodded. "I think so. I just felt a little dizzy." "Maybe you skipped breakfast again?" "I had tea and a banana." He raised an eyebrow. "That's not breakfast. That's survival." She chuckled, brushing it off. "I'm fine. It's nothing." But that evening, while reading to Caleb, she felt it again. The gentle swoop in her belly, the sudden nausea. This time she excused herself quietly and locked the bathroom door. 5 minutes later, she sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the test strip in her hand. Positive. Her hands trembled slightly. She hadn't expected it. Not yet. She and Khalid had talked about the future in soft, vague terms, never attaching timelines to anything beyond the present. But now the future had arrived. Quietly, beautifully. She emerged from the bathroom, her face composed but her heart galloping in her chest. Caleb was already fast asleep. Khaled was in the study, flipping through an architecture magazine while sipping orange juice. "I need to tell you something," she said, standing in the doorway. He looked up immediately. "What's wrong?" She walked toward him slowly and sat on the edge of the desk, her fingers wrapped around his wrist. "I'm pregnant." The words landed softly like snowflakes on warm ground. No shouting, no gasp, just stillness. Khaled stared at her. His mouth parted, but for a moment no words came. Then slowly his eyes moistened. "Are you sure?" he whispered. She nodded. "I took a test, twice." He sat back, blinking fast. "You're carrying my child." "Yes." A silence followed, heavy not with fear, but with awe. After everything with Amara, I thought I couldn't," he said, his voice barely audible. "The doctors said it was unlikely." Cleopatra took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. Well, unlikely just became real. And just like that, a single Tuesday became unforgettable. The next few weeks flowed with cautious excitement. Cleopatra didn't announce it immediately. She wanted to wait, to be sure, but inside the house the glow was unmistakable. Caleb noticed it first. "You smell different," he said one morning. Cleopatra blinked. "Do I?" "You smell like new." That same week, while tucking him into bed, Caleb asked, "Are you going to give me a baby sister?" She smiled. "How do you know it's not a brother?" He shrugged. "Because the house is already full of boys." She laughed, brushing his forehead. "Let's wait and see." Khalid became more attentive than ever. He insisted she stop working late. He kept fresh fruit in the kitchen and left sticky notes in her notebook that read things like, 2 glasses of water by noon, or else, "Take a break. Baby needs it. You're doing amazing. Also, you're glowing." He started going with her to doctor's appointments, asking more questions than she did. At one point, the nurse laughed and said, "You'll be the one pushing at this rate." "I would if I could," he replied. One afternoon, they had an unexpected visitor. Cleopatra opened the door to find her former landlord from the mainland, standing awkwardly in his old slippers. "I saw your name in the magazine," he said, eyes darting around the marble hallway. "I just came to say sorry for how I treated you back then. The pressure, the threats." Cleopatra looked at him quietly for a moment. Then she smiled gently. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded, holding out a small bag of garden eggs and mangoes from her old compound. "For old time's sake." She accepted them. "Tell your daughter to apply for the internship program at Danjuma Group." She mentioned she liked HR. His eyes filled with surprise. "You remember?" "I remember everything," she said. That night, as the three of them sat watching cartoons in the living room, Caleb resting his head on her lap, Khalid's arm around her shoulders, she whispered, "I never thought life could be this simple, this full." Khalid kissed the top of her head. "This isn't the end, Cleopatra. This is just the middle." She smiled. "Then let's keep building it, brick by brick, heartbeat by heartbeat." The morning sun spilled through the windows like liquid gold. Birds chirped on the balcony rails. Somewhere down the hallway, soft lullaby music floated from Caleb's room as he sat cross-legged beside his keyboard, humming as he played by ear. In the master bedroom, Cleopatra Danjuma stirred. She was 9 months pregnant now, her belly round and glowing with the weight of new life. Her hands rested protectively over her stomach, her heart calm even as her back throbbed gently from the heaviness of it all. Khaled had already gone downstairs to prepare her breakfast. Papaya slices, vanilla yogurt, and the special hibiscus tea she craved every morning. Not a chef, him, personally. That had become his ritual. His new power move wasn't in signing oil deals or negotiating mergers. It was peeling fruit for his wife and massaging her swollen feet after work. Cleopatra slowly rose from bed, smiling to herself as she walked to the window. Below, she could see Khalid and Caleb setting up a hammock in the garden. Caleb was giving instructions. Dad, a little to the left. No, your other left. Khalid laughed. You're bossier than your mother. You married her, remember? Caleb replied with a grin. Cleopatra pressed a hand to her lips, watching them from above. The man she once feared would never soften, and the boy who once sat in the rain with no one. How far they had come. Later that afternoon, the clouds rolled in slowly. Not a storm, just soft, steady rain, the kind that taps gently on rooftops and soaks the soil with quiet purpose. Cleopatra sat curled on the couch, Caleb beside her, his tiny fingers tracing patterns on her stomach. Does the baby feel the rain too? He asked. Maybe, she replied. Maybe she hears it and thinks it's music. You think it's a girl? I'm sure of it. Khalid entered the room with a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Comfort, Queen, he said. Rain or shine. She smiled. Do you remember the day we met? He nodded. How could I forget? You were standing in the middle of a thunderstorm, yelling at a stranger's father for leaving his child in the rain. I wasn't yelling, she protested. You were fierce. You made me feel shame I hadn't felt in years. She looked at him with soft eyes. I didn't see a CEO that day. I saw a man afraid to feel, and a boy desperate to be seen. Khalid crouched in front of her, placing both hands over her belly. And now look at us, from a rainy bench to this couch, from regret to rebirth. Caleb rested his head on her side. This baby is lucky. She's coming into a house full of love. Cleopatra's throat tightened. She is, she whispered. She really is. That night it began. Cleopatra felt the first contraction just after midnight. She tried to downplay it, brushing it off as a Braxton Hicks. But by 2 a.m., she was clutching the bedpost, breathing deeply through the pain. Khalid flew into motion, calm but quick, like a man who'd been preparing for this for 9 months straight. The driver had already been prepped. The hospital bag was by the door. Caleb? Cleopatra asked between breaths. I'm here, Mum, he said, stepping into the room fully dressed in his small sneakers and backpack. I want to go with you. You don't have to. I want to. Khalid nodded. Then let's go. Together. The hospital lights were white and soft. Nurses moved with practiced grace. Doctors whispered instructions. Machines beeped softly in the background. Hours passed. The pain increased. But Cleopatra didn't scream. She gritted her teeth, drew on the strength of every woman who had fought for a better life, and held on. Khalid never left her side. He held her hand. He whispered encouragement. He kissed her forehead through every push. And then, in one breath, one cry, one rush of wet skin and wild emotion, a baby girl was born. Tears flooded Cleopatra's face as the nurse placed the newborn on her chest. She's here, she whispered. Khalid bent forward, his lips trembling, as he kissed their daughter's forehead. You did it, he whispered to Cleopatra. You brought us all the way here. Caleb entered the room carefully, led by a nurse. Can I hold her? He asked, hands outstretched in innocent wonder. Cleopatra shifted gently, placing the swaddled bundle in his arms. The baby stirred, then settled. She's small, Caleb whispered, but she feels big. Khalid laughed quietly. She'll grow into her name. What's her name? Caleb asked. Cleopatra looked at her husband. He nodded. She's Amara after the woman who gave you life, but her middle name, Nena, means a mother's mother. A reminder that even from pain, something powerful can be born. Caleb smiled. Amara Nena Danjuma. I like it. A week later, they returned home. Cleopatra walked into the living room carrying Amara while Caleb guided her by the elbow, like a proud brother escorting a queen. Khalid stood waiting, arms wide, the house filled with fresh lilies and laughter. They sat on the couch, all four of them. No announcements. No parties. Just peace. And as the rain returned once more that afternoon, tapping softly on the rooftop like a friend stopping by to say, Remember? Cleopatra turned to Khaled and whispered, Would you ever believe all of this began because of a rainy day and a blind boy left on a bench? Khalid nodded, pulling them closer. One act of kindness, he said. That's all it took to rewrite every chapter. They sat in silence, a family woven together not by perfection, but by love that grew in the storm and bloomed under the rain. It had been 1 year since that rainy night turned into a lifetime. The Danjuma home now thrived with soft giggles, tiny footy pajamas, and the scent of baby powder mixed with jasmine tea. The living room was no longer a museum. It had become a home. There were finger paintings on the fridge, Braille books in little piles, rattles under the cushions, and a small pair of pink shoes, always missing from their matching set. Cleopatra sat on the garden bench, dressed in a soft cotton wrapper, her daughter asleep on her chest, breathing in slow, even rhythm. The sun filtered gently through the palm trees as birds chirped lazily in the branches above. Khaled stood nearby, talking quietly with Caleb, who now wore his independence like a crown. He was taller, sharper, more confident, and he never stopped asking questions. "Do you think Amara will look like me or Mum?" he asked, trailing his cane along the stepping stones. "I think she already has Mum's stubbornness," Khalid replied. Cleopatra looked up with a smile. "I heard that?" Khalid turned to her. "I was hoping you would." He walked over and sat beside her, gently brushing a finger down baby Amara's cheek. "She's perfect," he whispered, "just like her mother." Cleopatra leaned into him. "Do you ever think about how we started?" "All the time," he said. "A rainy evening, a soaked child, a kind stranger." She smiled softly. "And now, this." Khalid's gaze drifted across the garden, at their son, at their daughter, at the life they had built not through chance but through grace. "I used to think legacy was about buildings and wealth," he said. "Now I know it's moments like this. This is the legacy I want to leave behind." Caleb jogged over, placing something in Cleopatra's lap. "What's this?" she asked. "It's for her," he said shyly. She opened the folded paper. It was a crayon drawing. Amara in Cleopatra's arms, Caleb beside her, and Khalid standing behind them, holding an umbrella over their heads as rain fell gently around them. In scribbled handwriting it read, "This is what our family looks like. We are never alone in the rain again." Tears slipped down Cleopatra's cheek, not from sadness but from overwhelming joy. She looked at her husband, at her son, at her daughter, and whispered with full certainty, "We made it." Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.